Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today I have a review for you of Once Was Willem by Carey. So I would like to just say quickly up front, I was sent this review copy by Orbit, so you know I'm incredibly biased. I also have really enjoyed Carey's books in the past, so I read his Infinity Gate sci-fi multiverse series. Well, I've read book one and I loved it. And I should probably read book two. I have a copy, so I will eventually. But this book is something that is really very different for me. So this is a kind of medieval horror fantasy. It has a really interesting writing style. I'll read an excerpt in a minute. And it is from the point of view of a zombie, I guess. So let me read you the blurb and you can let me know in the comments down below if this intrigues you. 1100 and some years after the death of Christ, in the kingdom that had but recently begun to call itself England, I, once was Willem, rose from the dead to defeat a great evil facing the humble village of Cosham. The words enclosed herein are true. I speak of monsters and magic, battle and bloodletting, and the crimes of desperate men. I speak also of secret things, of that which lies beneath us, and that which impends above. By the time you come to the end of this account, you will know the truth of your own life and death, the path laid out for your immortal soul, your origin and your inevitable end. You will not thank me. Yeah, that's very accurate. This book, I will say up front right now, this book rules. I blasted through this book in like 3 and a bit days, even though I don't have much reading time at the moment. Like, it's not the longest book, it's like 300 pages, but I just had a really fantastic time with it. And the writing style, I mean, like, that blurb is kind of similar in writing style to how the book reads. I'll read you the first page. Well, not the whole page, but you know what I mean. My fingers are black with ink and my head aches as if it is about to burst at the seams like an overstuffed flour sack. But this treatise at last is ended. I lean back from my labour and draw breath, as God himself did on the 7th day. His work was great and mine is small, but all makings of the mind and heart are sacred, and this that you hold, good or bad as you may account it, is no exception. So, you can kind of see there that this... It's not written in the language that was actually used in medieval times, but it's written in a way that is reminiscent of that language. There's a lot of words I had to look up. This is very much kind of like ye olde English fantasy horror. It has some really fantastic religious horror in there, specifically Christian horror stuff. So if you are a fan of books like Between Two Fires, Christopher Buehlman himself blurbed this. His is the #1 blurb at the front. A masterpiece of medieval dark fiction. And I have to say, I would agree. I think that this book is genuinely really fun, and I had a great time with it. Now, this review is going to be spoiler free. I'm going to cover a few minor elements that you might consider spoilers if you wanted to go in completely blind. But if you did that, you're probably not clicking on a video like this anyway. So this book doesn't actually come out until I think the 5th of March. So you can currently pre-order it, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think you should. This was just a lot of fun, really. So the setup is we have a boy who has died. His name was Willem, and his parents go to a wizard, and they say to this wizard, "Can you bring our boy back from the dead?" And the wizard's like, "Yeah, sure." And he brings the boy back from the dead. But it's been too long since the boy has died, and he's a very different being now. He's what you might call a revenant in like ye olde fantasy terms, but he's kind of like a shape-shifting zombie almost. So he has kind of control over the makeup of his body and how his body like stretches and shapes. And he also has a few other abilities that kind of make him an interesting threat to the people of Cosham, the village that Willem grew up in. And he kind of escapes the village after kind of being, mobbed. And he kind of makes these friendships with these other kind of outcasts and fantastical creatures. And then we get to see what's going on with this wizard. The wizard has kind of received this prophecy that something incredible is going to happen to him at a specific place. And that specific place happens to be near Cosham. So he's kind of involved with the town via his proximity and via kind of taking part in this thing, this stuff up at the castle. And overall, I think that this book really, really sings when it's kind of switching between these characters, and you get to see a lot of the wizard character, Cain Caradoc, but the entire book's written from Willem's point of view as he is telling the story, kind of trying to preserve his story. He often will really foreshadow stuff, so he'll be like, oh, and that stuff about going to hell, that was a bad time, and you're like, what? And then he's like, but we'll come to that later. And he'll talk about like, oh, and I met this horrible monster, but don't worry, they were my friend, but we'll come to that later. And like, I really enjoy when foreshadowing is done well, and I think it's particularly done well in this book, and I think it's done well in terms of not just like a storytelling technique, but also building the tension, building the horror as well. I'm not a horror fan when it comes to movies or games or anything like that, but when it comes to books, a little bit of a pinch of horror in your fantasy, like that's like catnip for me. But a book like this, which is, I would say, almost 50-50 horror and fantasy, and this like kind of historical fiction as well, is something that I was not sure I would like up front. I kind of had the confidence that it would be at least well written because of M.R. Carey being a good author, but the amount that I loved it, I don't know if this is the first 5-star book of the year. This might be my first 5-star book of 2025. I'll have to think about it. And by think about it, I mean look and see on my Goodreads. But I think that there's a lot of elements in this that really pull together to make it a truly excellent 5-star read for me. Let's go through characters a little bit. So we had the main character, Once Was Willem, and I really like the way that he narrates the book, as is his story. And the way that he narrates the book and the way that it is the story that he's telling is even more, what's the term? It's even more like storytelling than you see from other books in the fantasy genre that are like, I'm going to tell you about my life. The foreshadowing is much better. And I think that I really like the way that Willem told the story from the future point, which I just genuinely really enjoyed that. And Willem has a really nice, unique voice as well. He doesn't talk like a modern character because he's writing this book in like 1105, but he also doesn't talk explicitly like the other characters in the book. They all have a really unique voice, and I really like that. And he feels very human for a non-human character. And one of the things that is quite interesting is that the human characters in this book seem to be a lot more flawed, and they are very mean-spirited in many ways, selfish, and kind of they're all kind of beset by these like secret shames that they have, and a lot of that works really, really well in contrast to Willem, who is this kind of more innocent character, which ironically that the monster with the inhuman strength and grisly visage is the most human character in the book, but that's that's kind of old hat in a lot of stories like this. But I feel like M.R. Carey did that very well. I think the next most important character over here really is the villain, is Cain Caradoc, the wizard, who is a truly hateful character. One of those proper love to hate villains. So if you like a good villain in your book, this is absolutely one that I will recommend to you. It's very early in the year for me to be saying that this will be a top 10 book of the year. But it is the best book I've read so far this year. And hopefully it doesn't exit my brain by the end of the year. You often find that books that you read early on in the year don't tend to figure out as highly on your top 10 simply because you've kind of forgotten how much you love them. But I'm going to try and remember. Somebody comment on this if it's December 2025 and be like, Sam, remember you love this book. But yeah, Cain's really interesting because he kind of kicks everything off by raising Once Was Willem back from the dead, as it were, or kind of birthing Once Was Willem from the corpse of Willem, and kind of thoughtlessly setting that kind of chain of events off, which ends up not going particularly well for him. But yeah, I did really like him as a villain, and I felt like the specific chapters that we got from his point of view were really good. So, because they're not actually from his point of view, they're from what Willem kind of thinks of as his point of view, which I really liked. So you get kind of a disdain for Caradoc in the way that he's discussed in his chapters, which I did really like. And I liked the very soft magic system, like magic just kind of works, and you don't need to know why. There's an interesting there are certain elements and components that are required for magic, but magic kind of just works, which I did really like. And then you also get, with Cain, you get kind of a bit more of an exploration of the magical side of things, because he's entrenched in magic, and the spells and the curses and stuff that he cast are horrifying, interesting, and well thought out. So yeah, a really fantastic love to hate him villain. And then I would say the other major characters that stand out to me, there's a few villagers from Cosham that stand out, like Pastor LeBone and Matthew Theakston and Jem Makepeace, and all of those are interesting. And they have these they have this really limited page time. All three characters are really important in the fabric of the village, but as a story, as characters, they get very little page time that they get to do a lot with. So yeah, really enjoyed that. And then we have the monsters. So we have Unsung Jill, we have Anna, we have Kel, we have Peter Proudfoot. So all of these are kind of supernatural entities of varying types and varying kind of strength and varying distances from human. And I really liked all of these characters, and I liked the way that M.R. Carey kind of set them up and set them apart, and also showed us their humanity in the face of their inhumanity. Unsung Jill in particular, I feel like there's a few really human moments from this kind of truly horrific horror story villain. And I would, I'm sure there's 1,000 questions that I would ask M.R. Carey about this character. So, yeah. And story-wise, where the story goes is excellent. We have kind of the original inciting incident, and then we kind of follow Cain's kind of nefarious plan and how the people of Cosham end up being thoroughly entwined in that plan, which I really liked, and how all of our monstrous characters come together to kind of defend the village and kind of take on Caradoc, which again I really liked. We also have some very interesting, like the Baron as well, Baron Horvath, very interesting in terms of the way that he's kind of at odds with Caradoc, but needs him or desires him, I guess. Lots of great dualities in this book. Characters who outwardly are one thing, inwardly are another. So, you know, we have Horvath, who is outwardly this kind of outlaw, but inwardly kind of a good guy, and a man with a strong conscience. Yeah, really, really enjoyed this book. And I think that this is one that I would genuinely recommend to like most people. The way that it ends in terms of the story was really satisfying. And we had a few bombastic chapters of action, which I kind of wasn't expecting from this book. It felt like, because there had been not much out and out, you know, fighting action throughout the book, that the end of the story would kind of follow in that vein, but it does actually keep ticking up and up and up, and eventually takes us into that kind of climactic battle, which I really enjoyed, and kind of a couple of them really. And I thought the fate of all of the characters was very interesting, and the new supporting cast that is kind of pulled in as we come into that final section I really liked, and the way that Once Was Willem will go on a tangent and it'll be like, and this is when, you know, we ended up meeting this character, and let me talk to you about their backstory, and we'll give you like the whole backstory as to why they're important and, you know, what's going on with them, which I really liked. I liked all the supernatural entities in this book. You know, we have these kind of proper classics, you know, we have shapeshifters, we have revenants, we have ghosts, and that sort of stuff I really liked. We have witches, for example, and it all kind of adds together to kind of give you this really strong vibe of this like old world horror. But it does feel kind of real in terms of to how village life is. I don't live in a village, I live in a small town, but I know, you know, I know a lot of villages near where I live and people that live in them, and the kind of isolated communities that spring up in villages is really interesting. And I think that M.R. Carey does that really well as well. I'll be honest with you guys, I could go on about this book for like another hour. Like, I've got a lot to say about this book, and I will probably keep that in the back pocket for the end of the year, or for maybe a spoiler chat, because I'm going to be sending this book to a friend of mine, and if they read it, maybe we'll have a full spoiler discussion about it, which I would really like to do. Or maybe one day I'll ask M.R. Carey if he wants to be on the channel, and we'll have an interview, and I'll ask him all of my burning questions. And I have to say that while this book is fully standalone, I would happily read a sequel, or even a spiritual sequel where it's, you know, new characters, new world, new magics and all that sort of thing, but with a similar vibe. And maybe that ends up being Between Two Fires, which has now shot up on my TBR based on people saying how similar these books are. So, if you have enjoyed the kind of reflective storytelling that you see in books like The First Binding or Name of the Wind, or if you like that kind of medieval Christian horror that you see in Between Two Fires, then I do think that Once Was Willem is a book that you should check out. If you are interested in the book based on what I've said, then I would highly recommend you check it out. I think that the standard plain old hardcover is really nice, although I know Broken Binding is selling a blue version. This one, obviously, you know, the highlight color is red, but they're doing a blue one. I don't think that works for me with the theming of the book. Like, blue isn't a very horror color for me, and this black and red is a little bit more gruesome and a little bit more true to the story, I feel. But yeah, really love this book. Oh, Mare's reading this book as well, so maybe Mare and I will chat about it. Especially if Ross reads it, I really hope that all three of us will get to have a chance to have a chat. But yes, really enjoyed this book, and I would recommend it to most people, unless you hate ye olde English stuff or you hate horror in your fantasy. But if you like any of those things, this is basically a must read, and I would say a must read in 2025 so that it can figure into your best books of, best new releases of 2025 lists, if you're the kind of person who makes those lists. Are you interested in reading this book? Drop a comment down below and let me know your thoughts if I've convinced you. Let me know if you are watching this review after you've read it. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your favourite character is. I would love to hear recommendations as well. If you've read this and you have other books like this that I should check out, please do tell me, because I absolutely love this. And if you have not liked this video, please drop down there and give it a like on your way to do your comment. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would love to have you as a part of this tiny little community that we're growing here. And I think we have fun. Click that subscribe button. And of course, I will speak to you on Wednesday.